When Don Lingenfelter brought his idea for removing the San Clemente Dam to his supervisors, they didn't exactly rush to schedule a briefing. He was the dam keeper, the person who monitored the instruments and maintained the valves. He wasn't a licensed engineer or a water scientist. He sat on no planning committees, and what he was proposing sounded, at first glance, absurd. He wanted to carve a 3,000-foot channel straight through a bedrock ridge and send the entire Carmel River down a different creek, routing it completely around the problem. The experts already had their plan. They intended to pour steel-reinforced concrete against the face of the dam, bulk it up, and declare the job finished. $49 million to strengthen a structure that hadn't held usable water in years, while doing nothing about the 2.5 million cubic yards of silt packed into the reservoir behind it. Nothing about the fish that couldn't pass through. Nothing about the 1,500 homes sitting downstream of what amounted to a seismic time bomb. Not relocate the sediment, not haul it out, not address any of it. Just shore up the wall and move on. Lingenfelter's answer was simpler. Forget the silt. Go around it. Nobody took him seriously. They would. In time. By the 1990s, the San Clemente Dam reservoir was holding roughly 70 acre-feet of water. The remaining 95% was dirt. Decades of accumulated sediment had filled the basin from the bottom upward, converting what had once been a functioning reservoir into dense compacted silt. The dam still stood, but it wasn't impounding water anymore. It was holding back 2.5 million cubic yards of mud. In 1991, state inspectors handed down the official assessment. The dam was seismically deficient. Positioned near an active fault, it could collapse during a significant earthquake or an extreme flood event. If it gave way, that mass of mud would barrel downstream toward 1,500 homes. The engineers had what appeared to be the straightforward answer: buttress the dam. Pour reinforced concrete against the existing face, thicken it, bring it up to a standard that could withstand the worst-case scenario. $49 million. The California Public Utilities Commission directed Cal-Am to pursue the least costly option. Buttressing was the plan. The trouble was that buttressing addressed exactly one issue. It prevented the structure from collapsing. It did nothing for the steelhead trout cutoff from 25 miles of spawning habitat upstream. It did nothing about the 2.5 million cubic yards of sediment still trapped behind the wall. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's National Marine Fisheries Service stated their position plainly. A reinforced dam fitted with sluice gates and a fish ladder sitting behind a sediment-clogged reservoir was not going to benefit the threatened steelhead population. The permits needed to move forward were unlikely to come through. So by the mid-2000s, the whole situation had hardened into a deadlock. Cal-Am wanted the cheapest path. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration wouldn't sign off on it. The dam kept aging. And everyone continued debating how to deal with 2.5 million cubic yards of sediment that was, for all practical purposes, impossible to relocate. That volume meant 250,000 truckloads. No road into the canyon could support that kind of traffic. No disposal site nearby could absorb that quantity. Every proposal met the same fate: too costly, too impractical, too damaging. The only approved solution couldn't actually get approved. In 2005, Lingenfelter went on a hike. He was walking the ridge that divides the Carmel River channel from San Clemente Creek, a tributary flowing parallel just to the north. And standing up on that ridge, he noticed it. Two waterways sitting at nearly the same elevation, separated by a narrow band of rock. If you blasted through it, you could redirect the river into the creek, upstream of the dam, upstream of the sediment, completely around the obstacle. The experts had spent years designing proposals to remove 2.5 million cubic yards. Lingenfelter wanted to remove none of it. They brought in consultants, engineering firms, and proposals running into hundreds of millions. He brought a topographic observation and a walk in the hills. Every costly plan attacked the sediment head-on. His approach left it untouched. You wouldn't have to move those 2.5 million cubic yards. You'd simply seal them off. Grade the surface, stabilize it with native vegetation and a dike, and let the river follow a new course. The old channel becomes a permanent containment area. The dam, now stranded in a dry dead end, gets torn down. The demolished concrete gets crushed and placed back in the new channel as step pools where migrating fish could rest on their way upstream. The project would use the problem as its own solution. He brought the concept to his supervisors. They weren't persuaded. As he puts it, "I don't think anybody took me real serious." That shifted when he started talking to Jonas Minton, a water policy advisor who'd been following the Carmel River situation for years. Minton grasped right away what Lingenfelter was proposing and why it was fundamentally different, not cheaper in the conventional sense, not simply shuffling dirt around, a total reroute. The river goes one direction, the sediment stays put. He helped channel the idea into the network of agencies already orbiting the project. The concept gained traction. Joyce Ambrosius at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, who had spent 16 years pushing for dam removal to be properly evaluated, recognized the math instantly. A dam removal effort demanding 250,000 truckloads of sediment extraction was never going to clear the approval process. A project that left the sediment undisturbed and sent the river around it was an entirely different proposition. Richard Svindland, CalAm's VP of Operations, would later describe the moment the idea clicked as a eureka moment. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's official characterization was more measured. The reroute was simply the most economical and efficient way to get the project done. The idea that nobody had taken seriously was now the only idea that held together. The ridge cut required excavating roughly 380,000 cubic yards of rock, about 1/6 of the sediment volume that every other plan had proposed to move. The excavated rock wouldn't be trucked to a landfill. It would form the diversion dike that permanently walled off the old river channel from the sediment mass behind it. The final price tag landed at approximately $84 million. CalAm covered $49 million, the same figure buttressing would have cost them. The remaining $35 million came from the California State Coastal Conservancy and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, funding the ecological restoration that the cheaper alternative could never deliver. Construction was greenlit and broke ground in 2013. Work began in 2013. The ridge cut meant blasting through solid bedrock in a remote canyon with minimal road access. Granite construction handled the primary excavation. The channel had to be sculpted with precision, wide enough to carry full flood volumes, with a slope engineered to give fish a navigable path upstream instead of an impassable wall of current. At the same time, the sediment field was being locked down. The surface graded, planted with native species, and armored with rock along the margins. By December 2014, the Carmel River was flowing through its new channel, while the old path sealed behind the diversion dike went dry, locking the sediment permanently in place. In November 2015, crews dismantled the San Clemente Dam piece by piece. The concrete was broken up and repositioned in the stream channel as boulders. In the very material that had obstructed the river for 94 years, now repurposed into resting pools and step pools where fish could pause during their upstream migration. Biologists began monitoring the river. The first winter after the dam came out, something appeared upstream of the old dam site that hadn't been documented there since 1921. Pacific lamprey, ancient eel-shaped fish that live most of their adult lives in the ocean before returning to freshwater rivers to spawn and die, showed up above where the dam had stood. Beverly Cheney, a fisheries biologist with the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District, discovered lamprey nests and carcasses during a routine field check. Her response was straightforward. Finding lamprey in waters where they'd been absent for over a century was, she said, very exciting. By 2018, the Pacific lamprey comeback was unmistakable, not through any stocking program, not because anyone transported fish from a neighboring watershed, but because the obstruction was gone and the fish returned under their own power. The steelhead numbers built more gradually, as predicted. Steelhead spend years at sea before coming back to spawn, so the first generation had to hatch, migrate to the ocean, mature, and return, a cycle spanning 3 to 5 years. Biologists installed a fish trap at the base of Los Padres Dam, 5 miles above the former San Clemente site, to tally how many were making it the full distance upstream. In 2017, they recorded 7 fish at that trap. The skeptics who had spent years questioning whether dam removal justified the extra $35 million had that number to point to: 7 fish. The engineers who had favored buttressing felt confirmed in their doubts. In 2019, the count at Los Padres Dam came back at over 127 steelhead, an 18-fold jump in 2 years. The Carmel River has been flowing unobstructed for less than a decade. The outcomes are already hard to argue with. Steelhead now have clear passage to 25 miles of spawning and rearing habitat that was sealed behind 10 stories of concrete for 94 years. The tally at Los Padres Dam climbed from 7 fish in 2017 to 127 in 2019 to upwards of 160 in more recent seasons. Pacific lamprey, not even the primary focus of the restoration effort, came back on their own within the first winter after removal, fully documented by 2018. California red-legged frogs now travel through streamside corridors that had been severed for a century. The 1,500 homes downstream no longer sit under the shadow of a seismic dam failure. The sediment that engineers argued over for years remains sitting exactly where it was in 1921. It's now a stabilized, revegetated landscape folded into the contours of the valley. The river flows around it. The Klamath River dam removals, the largest in American history, studied the San Clemente model and applied the same sediment bypass approach when they dismantled 4 dams in 2023 and 2024. The project cost $84 million. Buttressing the dam would have run $49 million and resolved nothing ecological. The gap, $35 million, delivered the return of 2 species that hadn't been present in the upper watershed since Woodrow Wilson occupied the White House. The lamprey came back for free. Nobody hauled them in. Nobody operated a restocking program. The barrier came down, and the fish found their own way home. The person who came up with the idea was a dam keeper out on a hike. His supervisors didn't take him seriously. The river did. The principle is straightforward, and it keeps surfacing in river restoration projects across the country. Every expensive proposal failed because it tried to fight the sediment directly. Lingenfelter's approach disregarded it entirely and redirected the water instead. The dam that blocked a river for a century is gone. The fish returned before anyone finished debating whether they would. That's what $35 million beyond the cost of the wrong solution buys you. If you want more stories about engineering that actually solves things, approaches that succeed, not because they're complicated, but because someone understood the system well enough to find the simpler path, subscribe. There are more of them out there than you'd expect.